Great pleasure in being able to introduce Cathy Lane tonight with her professorial lecture. Angus is going to do a lot more, though, about that before Cathy gets her gig. But this, I just wanted to say, this is it's not an area I know until I came here 4.5 years ago, sound arts. My background's actually graphic design, so I physically, mentally sit in another part of the college, if you like. But I do think I've learnt so much about this area since I've been here. I think one of the extraordinary things about this area that I've learnt both through Cathy, Angus, Chris App, the Centre for Research in Sound Arts, and all of the people that work in that area, is the amazing work that, not only the research work that goes on that has incredible impact, but also the work that happens with students as well, which is, it's a really good example of how research has a major impact on teaching in the university. And I just want to say that because it is absolutely exemplary. I'm not going to say any more because Angus is much more articulate in all this stuff than I am. So I'm going to hand over to Angus now. Hopefully we won't get a fire alarm, but if we do, just follow me. So. But over to Angus. Thank you.
Thanks, Natalie. Okay. It felt fitting to hear Cathy's name being spoken back in March by a doctoral candidate defending himself from questioning from a black-cloaked jury in a dark wood-panelled 500-year-old room that was gridded with sombre portraits and striped by weak shadows cast by a spring light that left the North Sea grey. It felt right too, though less expected, to hear her name this last weekend in a village where the discussion in the packed former cinema was of the Nueve Geografie del Sueño. The smell was of orange blossom on the turn, and our ears, when we emerged into the dusk piazza, were met with the barks of unseen dogs reverberating off distant alleys. And it felt appropriate again, just yesterday, to read Cathy's name online in an article that conjured conversations conducted in weather of ice-laden winds and crunching snow in Svalbard's 5th season, that locals call the dark winter. Why were these three encounters fitting, right, and appropriate locations in which to hear or read Cathy Lane's name? Spoken by an Indian PhD student in Leiden University, referred to by a young Italian curator in the tufa stone of Sant'Agata in the Benevento district of Campania, and written by a professor of English from Georgia State University in the Times Higher Education Supplement. Well, they were fitting, right, and appropriate because firstly, these located encounters resonate with the geographical sweep of Cathy's own research, a sweep that is evident from Soundings and Resoundings, the professorial platform publication that has been structured like a composition. A sweep that doesn't only reflect the geographies of her investigations, the Hebrides, India, diasporic London, the north that is idea and the north that is real, and places that find themselves on the maps of our imagination, whether it is power that is the cartographer or resistance. But a sweep that also reflects the geographies where her work is disseminated, where her research is installed, performed, and articulated. Fitting, right, and appropriate too, secondly, because these encounters express the sensitivity to times and histories that is woven throughout Cathy's research. The ancient university that was a projection of Dutch colonial power, the atavistic geology of the tufa and the rhythms of rurality, and the online as metonym for the temporalities of information, virtual and archival. In Cathy's work, times and histories are found audible, whether they echo through place names, they register in the speech where memory makes its exchange, they unfold from an archive's pleats and creases, or they are transmitted as commands and protocols. Fitting, right and appropriate, thirdly, because these encounters reflect something that I think is special about Cathy's work. Buddhaditya Chattopadhyay, defending his PhD in wood-panelled Leiden, was analysing a composition from the Hebrides suite in order to articulate what he perceived as convergence between his and Cathy's approaches to expressing meaning through sounded material. Leandro Pisano, the curator and author in Orange-Blossomed Sant'Agata, was referring the villagers in the old cinema to Cathy's concept of ear-led in her essay, Listening for the Past. And Randy Malamud was writing in the THES of a presentation that Cathy had made at the Svalbard conference, Rethinking Remoteness and Peripherality. The special that is revealed about these orientations in Cathy's composing, writing and speaking is that all combine to become a cohesive constellation, where categories of practice and theory, art and scholarship get set in motion, blurred and blunted. All are sensed and creative incarnations of thought, work, exploration. Fourthly and finally, and most importantly, my little anecdotes of recent encounters are apposite because they all speak, each in their own way, to the inspiration that comes from Cathy's work. Inspiration that's excited her listeners and her readers, her collaborators and those whose truths she has told, and the successive generations of students she has taught here and elsewhere. Certainly, I am proud to declare myself equally inspired by Cathy Lane's work, proud to say that she's a valued colleague and friend, and proud to introduce this, her UAL professorial platform on soundings and resoundings, a theme and variations.
Thank you very much, Natalie. Thank you, Angus, for that amazing introduction. Prelude. Loss.
Hello, Catherine. Again. Sorry to worry. Could you give me a really not serious, but it's something. Well, I can't explain it all. It's to do with your tablet anyway. You've been late, I can't really tiny, 20 minutes. I'm not sure it's today or tomorrow. He's been all day. I don't know what he's supposed to be doing, or I'm supposed to be doing. But oh, sorry, Kat, I didn't mean to ring you at all, so I'll speak to you later on. Sorry if I disturbed you. Catherine, where are you? It's 7 o'clock and we still don't know where you are. If you don't leave up, tomorrow, I go to have my hair cut. I mean, in a couple of hours, I think I'm expecting better than this. I'm going to wait here now. What do I do? Please let me know. I'm waiting in now. It's called. What do I do? Okay? Please let me wait here now. What do I do? What do I do?
My mother is losing her memory. Slowly but surely, I'm witnessing her loss of control of her life and her loss of language, almost imperceptible on a daily basis, but significant when heard over weeks or months. She often can't remember what just happened, or indeed what should be about to happen. As her memory disintegrates, small gaps become huge omissions as her history, and therefore mine, gets rewritten with each iteration. Much of my work is about memory, sound and memory, frailty and memory, the frailty of both memory and sound, and about what happens when we lose our memory, or our memories, either individually or collectively. But more than that, I'm interested in how memory is formed and reformed, and how histories get lost or omitted from the grand narratives of the past that inform our present realities. I'm interested in what happens when pieces of history are silenced, or when certain voices get muted, and equally interested in recovering and unmuting those voices, the lives lived and the experiences that they can speak for. These experiences may be individual or collective. They may relate to place, family, labour, or aspects of social, cultural and political life. So my theme this evening is the soundings and the resoundings of memory, and I hope over the next hour or so to show how some of my work might be heard as a series of variations on this theme. Variation 1. Fragments.
Memory, as far as I can make out, does not have a particular location, or it doesn't reside anywhere except in remembering itself. When the memory has once bits of experience reside around the brain, memory is continually created as a utterly unreliable in some ways, because who could say whether the feelings and emotions seems to be both sides and actually belongs to it doesn't reside in humans, like the means we have learned is created. Who could say this image is correct, and not an image of a core or a film or a picture, another part of one's life, which, seeming to fit the general story, is present as a servant. As far as I can make out, it doesn't have a particular location in the brain. It is excitingly resides in discrete packets of memories. As far as I can make out, it doesn't reside in particular locations. It is as radio as far as I can
In Hidden Voices, a dance work and film made in collaboration with the late choreographer Rosemary Butcher, dancer Eleanor Gianotti, stark in a red costume, moves on the spot as if negotiating her way through the unrelenting airstream of fragmented memories rushing towards her. She runs, swims through them, always looking forward, never looking back, until at one crucial moment she looks behind her to see if any of those memories have caught up with her. It is as if she's escaping her memories, trying to get beyond them, but with her lack of forward motion, she is in fact surrounded, encompassed, and even overwhelmed by them as they fragment and reform all around her. When memory gets lost, Some voices are silenced. Is what we cannot hear potentially more significant than what we do hear? Do we need to listen carefully for the silences and be aware of what we ourselves are not listening to? Maybe we need to be watchful of the mechanisms that allow some things to be heard. Variation 2, unmutings. In Hidden Lives, I explored ideas of the house as a repository of memories and of women as the curators of hidden histories. For Hidden Lives, I recorded a number of female friends and families reading text passages from the Book of Hints and Wrinkles, a household management manual from the 1930s. The book describes the repetitive cycle of regular tasks concerned with all aspects of household management and childcare, shared by women across centuries, societies and cultures. The daily routine timetable ensures that no woman could ever spend much time outside the house or away from this back-breaking schedule. Women are viewed as part of the household furnishings, to be polished and scrubbed in order to look clean, welcoming, attractive, and most of all, to be silent.
$8:30. Found on the line. Kitchen and special bedrooms out to as much as babies returning. Babies as much as wash up. Okay. Three. Babies. One p.m. Baby's tea. 1 p.m. and shopping. Toothpaste from baby Gia, silver,
The themes of the domestic, family, and the lives and histories of women, which I first investigated in Hidden Lives, have surfaced repeatedly in my work, as have some of the compositional strategies used in the piece, such as composing with the voices of friends and family. Many of you will feature in some of these extracts, be warned. The sounding of written text, and the use of recorded spoken word as primary material. Variation 3. Voices.
And then she hasn't really got a hat. It's like the pickle pot is her hat. It's like the pickle pot is her hat. It's like the pickle pot is her hat. So my daughter tried to make pickle jars sit on the island. The side and the island. Pickle the song. Pickle the song. Pickle the song.
The story of my friend Margie and the pickle pot is just one way that I've tried in The Pickle Pot Is Our House to explore food as a carrier of memory and ideas of home. The piece weaves together individual domestic memories and recollections of family life in the form of field recordings and interviews from the UK and India. Over the course of the work, we hear recordings of food being prepared and cooked, of the places where food is grown and sold, of people and companies selling food and food products, and of the different voices of people talking about the food that reminds them of home and their childhood, as well as the foods they like to cook and how to prepare them. The piece explores people's emotional investment in food as a focusing on the preparation and consumption of home food as central to family life. While the details of who cooks and what is cooked reflect individual histories, together the voices build up a collective cultural and social history of gendered domestic relationships.
My mum never done it.
My mum she was on her and every time she just wanted to cook. Really enjoyed her.
Some creatures and quite kind of intricate names that took quite a long time and dinner parties and stuff. And then there was a time when it was
My mum used to make it very well.
My mum would have done it at the time.
My mum.
My father used to make porridge.
veggie.
My mum and my dad. My dad.
My mum and my dad.
My mum and dad.
The McDonald's.
Yeah.
Well, that was my
I had a
dad's.
small provision store for me.
Well, he used to cook on
He
Sundays.
made a curry on a Tuesday.
Semi-mechanized which manufactured your bread and all that.
Well, he used to cook on Sundays.
My mum.
Carrot.
My mum.
I like bacon.
Ketchup.
Fried rice.
Adding flour.
The French.
Vanilla.
Bacon.
Mum.
Turkey.
Vanilla. Mum.
These personal stories operate within the larger political, economic and cultural histories of food and spices within colonialism, particularly the complex relationship between Britain and the Indian subcontinent. Variation 4. Family. Memories of food also form a significant part of the ties that bind.
Anything you can guarantee happening every day with lunch. That's nice.
Yeah, you sat down at a desk.
Which was always on bread. My dad mouthed it. There was a little kitchen out the back with a fridge.
Nice bagels and
Microwave. Nice.
bagels.
We used to eat quite a lot of backpack mackerel fillets, which I used to really like that because I liked it. Big desks, just to warm them up a little bit. And my dad had his desk, so my basically we did a split. My uncle sat at his desk and they were arranged in how nice the rye bread was, you know. But yeah, they would always order a lot of everything at this chairs.
Yeah, I had those cartons of wine in the office. So yeah, we'll have a little bit of
You
wine.
actually, if there were quite a few customers there, and there was always like one of those 3-litre boxes. I mean, sometimes lunch was fabulous. Glass of wine, shop too, and there was snoozing in the afternoon.
Used to call it the most exclusive luncheon club in London.
The Ties That Bind, made in collaboration with Tessa Brown, is based on oral history interviews conducted with family members from 3 generations of the White, formerly Vajcras family, whose small family business, trading in wholesale underwear, particularly the consistently best-selling Triumph Doreen bra, existed in the East End of London in the early 1990s. During the 80s and early 90s, most of the customers were African stallholders.
There was a traditional old UK manufacturing who made a lot of stuff. You could buy them at lots of wholesalers, hence the low markup on their stuff, because everyone sold.
You see trading.
There was a lot of secrecy. There's a lot of secrecy, yes. Middle person for the UK overmakes.
Wanted to talk about a supplier in front of customers or just out in the warehouse.
We wouldn't use someone's company name, we would say Charlie's Brass. Debtor had a code name, I think we might have called it before. Yeah, we quite often used, you know, some of the smaller
On a
companies
weekly
use
basis,
something.
because you know they bought stock, sold it, and came back for more. Market
Customers were pretty much exclusively market traders from
Nigeria, she comes
East
from
London.
Nigeria.
From
Ivory Coast. I mean,
Nigeria.
A lot of secrecy.
Bahrain, she
There's
comes
a lot of secrecy.
A lot of names starting with A.
Yeah,
Little shops.
from Lagos, also from Lagos. Emia, Lagos. Animas Sean, Lagos. Emia, Lagos. AJ Baby, Lagos. Aja, Lagos. Kenzania, also from Lagos.
They bought Triumph bras, Gossard bras, and the a lot of things that were manufactured.
Amoju,
Some,
also from Lagos.
great big black bag. Nobody wanted our customers going straight to full of Marks Spencer's bras.
Lagos, AJ Baby.
Nigerians like the Doreen bra.
Slowly, aspects of the family are revealed through the history of their small business, which, helped by loyal family friends, evolved from a knitted tie business in Poland in the 1920s, to running a factory and a shop in Mitte, Berlin in the 1930s, to fleeing the Nazis and coming to London in the 1940s, and establishing first their knitwear and then the wholesale underwear business, until the sons and daughters no longer wanted to run it anymore.
Actually, Manastra and Izzy went first, and they got visas.
Foresight till even 39, was really quite late. We were all very lucky. It was really quite the machinery, and it was really quite late. It was really quite late. We were all very lucky.
All broke out.
It was really quite late. I left in 39.
Maybe because he came here when he was 10.
My brother and father left in 38.
My
My
father
sister went by some devious route.
Each family member revealed a different relationship to their family's history of immigration and assimilation.
The only thing we knew was business.
They would have been immigrants.
When I came to England, pop song was "Have you any umbrellas" or something like that. The thing is, I can't even remember learning English and sort of stumbling over the language. I was trying to improve my English. Also, I had to improve my
effect that that history has had on me.
There was a time when my dad considered himself
We
British.
lived upstairs and had the factory downstairs, and then we moved to Upper Clapton Road. We
Definitely wanted to be British, like German. Dad was a little bit of a we went through.
We feel very much that he comes from there.
I always felt like, we're not really English, are we? I didn't know it.
I think, it was
When people ask where I'm from, I just say...
I feel very much that I'm from
really
here.
I do know. You should.
I occasionally just say I'm Jewish.
I don't know how much they
Like how I don't work my identity, and if I'm trying to manufacture there. Diluted, basically. Grandfather changed the name, which is very standard practice.
definitely want them to grow up knowing.
It's quite a nice feeling being connected with that.
Over the course of the interviews, not only were family memories revisited, but the conversations also revealed how memories are made into stories and passed down between generations, as family member after family member use the same words and turn of phrase to relate their stories. Variation 5. Words. While the ties that bind reveal how narratives are handed down from generation to generation through stories which often share language and turns of phrase, Preparations for an Imaginary Conflict examines how narratives are constructed over and over again by those in power, drawing very directly on the stories of the past, and specifically how the fiction of the enemy is created through sound and language.
Our enemy is dominant, dehumanizing.
Fury and might of the enemy must very soon. take people's passports away. Strong security, investing in security, must be serve all our people.
You're the true peace party.
The image of the enemy is
Be counter to our values. This ideology protect our way of life.
For the protection of our people and our way of life at risk.
Be counter to our values.
Poisonous ideology. Protection of our people and our way of life. Who put our way of life at risk?
Including all that we have known and cared for.
Preparations for an Imaginary Conflict focuses on two periods in the 20th century in the UK when the public was led to expect an attack or an invasion. The first in 1940, when a German invasion was expected, and the second in the 1960s, when it was widely believed there might be a nuclear attack. Using a variety of recorded spoken word, it examines how a possible attack or invasion has been imagined, planned and prepared for, and how the government has, with various degrees of success, first of all tried to create and then unite people behind the idea of the enemy. The work uses archival sound recordings from a wide variety of sources, including official government advice about how to prepare for and behave in the event of an attack, and recorded post-attack broadcasts which fortunately were never used. Field recordings, primarily from the South Coast sites of potential World War II invasion, and sounded text, including advice from Ministry of Information leaflets, German surveys of the UK, and sections from fiction which imagines that an attack has taken place, were also used as material.
Post, siren sounded, postponed. All men by order keep. Attack.
About 800 posts, and they work on clusters of 3. One cluster has radio.
We live in the channel, a monstrous riding class prepare ourselves. Each one of us to face the appalling catastrophe that may be our supreme.
Attack.
Threat. Feed this threat.
Threat we face.
Threat is very clear.
This is BBC Television from London. This is BBC Television from London has been suspended. All programming has been suspended.
Your family sufficient shelter, drinking water. Make the site soft and
This is BBC Television from London and dozens of other
Thank you.
offensive vacancy in Danish emergency nuclear strike against nothing today but the current threat level is critical. It means an attack is imminent. The current threat means evacuations are currently taking place in the London area. Evacuation motorways and airports have been closed for military use. Non-essential telephone lines have also been temporarily disconnected. Essential telephone lines have also been Please stand by and await further information. Please stand by.
You are better off in your own home.
Remember, there is nothing to be gained by trying
So, in case of nuclear attack.
You are better off in your own home.
Seeking immediate shelter. Attack warning red. Attack warning red.
No solid cover, lie flat in a ditch or a hole, and cover your head, face and hands as fast as you can.
Variation 6. Archives. Over the last 2 decades, I've used material from many different archives: small, large, national, local, analogue, digital, official, unofficial, organised, disorganised. I'm particularly interested in how the sound recordings of personal memories that are often conducted by museums, libraries and public archives and community groups can be used compositionally in a work of sound art. Often an underused resource, these collections are a reminder of past ways, language, and ways of talking, narrativizing, and storytelling. Accents, turn of phrase, and paralinguistic utterances are as informative as the stories themselves, and over the years become indicative of time and place. Above all, they are about people, often talking about quotidian things, the stuff of life. Oral history, or history from below, focuses on the experience and perspectives of ordinary people, in contrast to the traditional political history and its focus on the actions of great men. This below can also be applied to the voices of those who are never heard in the grand narratives of the past or the present, and to those who operate outside the dominant social norms. Archives can provide alternative discourses and compensate from the edits and omissions from the specific narratives of power that we inherit. I like what Maria Tambuco has said about the archive, not as a stale, closed fixity, but as a fluid, dynamic force which, quote, keeps uncovering layers of distortions and is directed to the future rather than the past. She goes on to remind us that how our present has been constituted in ways that seem natural and indisputable to us are only the effects of certain historical, social, cultural, political, and economic configurations. By revealing this contingency, we become freer to imagine other ways of being. So I want to mention here the Her Noise Archive, which is housed at LCC Archives and Special Collections, and which celebrates recent and contemporary feminist work related to sound art and experimental music. Through various methods and initiatives in collaboration with my colleagues and students, we've been trying to challenge the neat canonical narratives told about the development of sound art and experimental music, and thus queer the records, inspire new generations of artists, and collect materials for academic and artistic scrutiny that might otherwise be overlooked, and thus try to influence or fracture the dominant narratives that are operating in our artistic and academic worlds. Variation 7. Land. Places hold and anchor memories as much as archives. Over the last decade, the Outer Hebrides of Scotland have been the focus of much of my work. Through interviews, field recordings, and existing oral history materials, I've been investigating aspects of people's relationship to place, trying to move beyond the visual and listen out for sonic traces of past lives and past events. These listenings, often conducted in collaboration with local residents, have involved landscape, language, song, stories, music, weather, labour, religion and culture. A recent project focused on the resonances of place names and how they fix memories and historical events onto a landscape.
My friend keeps having and he drops on the sand, so we call it Sandy Jack. Sandy after that. Yeah, there is no bridge. Yeah, there is no bridge. Yeah, there is no bridge.
Last year I found a hole in some rocks at the beach, and then one before that, like about a month or so.
It also investigated intergenerational relationships to place names through the medium of sound. Underpinning this were questions about whose history could be commemorated on the landscape, with the aim of anecdotally renaming some of these places according to other histories and other memories, both shared and individual. As Robert Macfarlane has noted, quote, "Language is used not only to navigate, but also to charm the land. Words act as a compass. Place speech serves literally to enchant the land, to sing it back into being, and to sing one's being back into it. I found that for those crofting communities of Benbecula, North and South Uist, the land holds individualised yet shared memories of place and function. Place names, particularly those in Gaelic, act as a mnemonic for a dynamic memory recreation. It is as if a mesh of past, present, ideas of kinship, place, features of the landscape, and the shared and personal experiences of each speaker and listener covers and overlays the lived landscape." Variation 9. Silence. So this brings me to my last variation. It concerns an ongoing project which, as yet, has not been satisfactorily sounded. The starting point was this photograph of the Ayers House in the Hackney Archives. The home, which operated from 1900 to 1947, was a mixture of boarding house, employment agency and Christian mission, specifically for female domestic workers employed as nannies by British families travelling to and from India and other parts of the British Empire. The staged photograph shows an early 20th century drawing room, populated by around 15 women, all of whom are engaged in reading or sewing. The room looks quiet. As it turns out, it is a very quiet chunk of history. For while there are many British people who can still tell the story of their Indian upbringing under the auspices of their ayah, they know little detail about their ayah.
What was your ayah's name? Or did you only have one?
You never knew the ayah's name.
Oh,
She was just ayah.
Oh, isn't that extraordinary? So did you know anything about her?
No.
Most archival records reveal women with no name apart from that of their employer, no place of birth apart from that of their very large country, women who leave little trace, except muted in this and in the few other photographs that exist of the ayah's home. It seems almost impossible to find an ayah or her descendants to tell their story. So, in anticipation of working out how to tell this sonic mystery story, I'll leave you with a sonic memory.
Did she tell you, did she tell you stories or read? Did she read?
No.
Could she read?
No, she couldn't read.
Yeah.
I don't think she ever told me stories, but she used to sing to me.
Yes.
And I can remember I was very small, and she used to pat me to sleep and sing. Chutta Apasuka, Chutta Apasuka, Chutta Apasuka, Chutta Apasuka, Chutta Apasuka.
Thank you very much.